Welcome, everybody. Tonight we're working on Unit 11, and this video is going to be a mixture of both a little bit of lecture and working on the exercises tonight. So there's not going to be like really one separate lecture video and then a homework video. They're kind of intermingled. So I'm just saying that up front. And the same will be true for Unit 12, which is coming up hopefully later tonight if we move quick enough. The first topic for tonight is creating views. This is corresponding with chapter 12 in the Murach's third edition MySQL book. You know, if you're reading, the PowerPoint, of course, is available here. I do not anticipate pulling this up for any reason tonight. But what I did want to kind of point out is the process that we're about to go through is a process where we're basically going to be pre-building what we call a view, and you'll see the syntax here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit to kind of get rid of the ads and highlight the content. And basically what a view really is it's kind of a pre-built query, is right, kind of a nice way to say it. And this is really kind of the correlation between the two units that we're talking about tonight. So unit 11 covers views, and unit 12 covers what we call stored procedures or functions, right? You can look at it either way. But when we're creating a view, we're basically still building a query. So let's kind of just very quickly look at the syntax of this. And you'll notice that we use this keyword, or keywords, I should say, create view, you give it a name, and then and then you list your query, like whatever query you would normally do in your database, you could do here. So the first thing that you would say is, okay, well, why the heck would I do this in the first place? Why not just do the query? Okay, well, here's the why. If you have a query that runs all the time, it makes a whole lot of sense from a database standpoint to create a view, which is kind of a stored query, if you will. So in other words, we're going to create a query, we're going to give it a name, and if we're running it all the time, instead of building that query from scratch each time, I just trigger that view to run, and it gives me the same results, right? So this is really, really convenient for a lot of different things. And it's got a lot of strategies as to why you do this. Aside from the obvious, hey, I don't have to build the query every time, which is a big time saver, right? Like, for example, if you just want to see a list of your customers, okay, well, that's pretty common, right? So let's take a look at that list of customers. But it's also what information is presented in that query that's also relevant. So for example, let's say I'm looking at a list of customers, but let's say maybe their social security number is embedded into their customer information. And I don't want to put that out with every query that we type about the customer. That shouldn't go up on every screen, right? So I can create a view that gives me everything I need, except for maybe sensitive information, and then allow me to focus on the stuff that's important relative to the task I'm completing, right? So in other words, a salesperson, for example, it might be very handy to have a list of customers. They don't need the social security number. They just need to know who to call to try to get an order, right? If we're trying to process maybe their, application for credit, well, then we need their social security number, if you could see the difference, right? So the basic point of this, though, is that ultimately what this really is a query. It's just a named query that we can call back as many times as we want. So this is the generic view of that. Right. And the interesting thing is even though we're naming this and we created it at a certain point in time, if more data goes into the database after we've created it, the view dynamically updates. It's not locked in time. It will be there, and it will use whatever the current data set is to display what it's doing. So for example, here's a little view that they created, and they're calling it create view Brazil customers. Now they are using square brackets around all their views. And I will tell you that as we kind of saw with indexes last week, that a lot of database designers use certain naming conventions to more quickly identify the fact that something is a view as opposed to something else in a database system. And in this case, they're using square brackets around it. And that's not a habit I've ever been in. About as far as I would take it is I would either say view underscore Brazil customers or something like that, or I might call it like VW underscore, Brazil customers in camel case, something like that. Now, the fact that there's square brackets around this, also notice the fact that there's a space in the middle of the name, and that kind of allows for that to function that way. So whatever you want to call that view, it's really kind of up to you. I would try to stick with kind of standard database naming conventions personally, right? And I like the prefix approach. That's kind of the way I was taught. And then whatever system you end up working on, chances are whoever your master DBA is will probably enforce a certain way of doing things because they already do it that way. All right, so that's for the naming. But really, it's kind of like basically creating an alias for the query, right? Once you get past the first line, it is a standard query. It's select from where, right? And in this case, we're just looking at customer name, contact name, and from the customers table where the country equals Brazil. And every time we run it, it will give us a list of all our Brazil customers, no matter when we run it. We don't have to do anything like code this query, right? We just have to call the view to run, right? So once this has been created, then we can actually run it like a regular query. So we can actually use a select statement on it to pull it back. So I can say select star from Brazil customers, and it will show me all the Brazil customers, right? Based on that query right there. All right, if we look at another one here, all right, they have an example of, okay, it says the following SQL query creates a view that selects every product in the products table with a price higher than the average price. So they create the view, they call it products above average price. They pick their couple fields they're selecting from which table, and then they have the logic in the where statement, which is really kind of, filtering it, right? Where the price is greater than, the average price from that table. So it's actually running a complicated thing in the background. But remember, when we're trying to extract this information, I don't have to worry about this like strange syntax or remembering how to put it together, right? I'm just going to select from this, which is a whole lot easier than typing all of that, right? And you'll see the correlation here as we kind of keep rolling forward on it. We can also use views to the syntax here of views to adjust the view after it's already been created. So notice the command here, create or replace, right, a view. And so what this kind of tells you, and different database systems handle this different ways, by the way, is that if this already exists, we're redoing it. That's what replace means. What a lot of database programmers prefer to do, and this is kind of a comfort thing really, is instead of saying create or replace, often what we will do is we will drop a view, get rid of it, and then create it again. And typically I think that's a safer maneuver. But if you don't want to take that step, you can use this syntax here to replace one that might already be there. So for example, we already had one with Brazil customers. If I run this and the other one still exists, it would do the replace, right? That's kind of a no-brainer. And what's the difference? Well, they're adding city to it, right? So somebody wants to change that view. So you can choose either approach. You can drop, right? Or you can replace, right? And here's an example of the drop syntax. Notice that you have to say what you're dropping. You're dropping a view, and then you can get rid of it, and then you can just create one from scratch. Or you can use the syntax here, which is combine to create or replace. All right. So that's pretty much all the lecture I'm going to give you here on the Unit 11 topics. What I do want to do is get into coding through the homework. And we're going to be working here. There is a document attached to this, so make sure that you click through to get to the document. And somewhere here on one of my many screens, I do have it loaded up here so that we can start coding through. And so my goal right now is to code through this it's your job to keep track of the SQL statements that you're typing. And then every time you create output, to do a little screenshot of that. And what I'm hoping to see in these boxes is, your SQL code, and your screenshots, if appropriate, for the action. All right, so let's look at the first set of asks here and see what we can build. So we're going to be using the My Guitar Shop database. And the first step is to create a view, and notice the naming convention here, VW underscore order total. And that's, more the approach I'm used to, by the way. That displays the order ID and the total of the associated orders. All right, so let's first get into MySQL Workbench here. I'm going to go full screen. I am going to connect to my local instance, right? And then I never saved my file from last time because I switched right to the other class. So I'm going to save this as, I think that's unit 10, chapter 11, SQL. And then I'm going to close it and get rid of it because we don't need that. And we'll get rid of the dog thing there. I am going to bring up a new query window. And since we are going to be using My Guitar Shop, let's start with that as a statement. And I will zoom in just a little bit to make it easier to read. So I'm going to use My Guitar Shop, semicolon, and I'm going to go ahead and execute that query. So we are now attached to that database where we are ready to code. So the first command was create a view named VW order total that displays order ID and total of the associated orders. All right, so we might want to do a little bit of a look at what tables we want to work with, right? And there's an orders table. So let's just take a look at that really quick. And what it shows here is basically order ID, the customer ID, the order date, ship amount, tax amount, ship date, et cetera, including their credit card numbers. This is a little bit unusual, but yeah, sometimes databases do store that stuff, right? Which is why it's a real problem when places get hacked and they store your information. And a couple, interesting notes here is like whenever you see a Visa number and it's like this, and they have, basically Visa and MasterCard have test numbers you can use on your payment gateways to make sure that your systems are working correctly. And the number that you see there, the 4 with all ones, that's a typical Visa test number, by the way. Same thing, this is for Discover. That's a typical number for that. And I forget what I think the MasterCard one was maybe all 5s, or it was 5 with all 1s. I forget. It's been a while since I've done that kind of coding. But the point is, I don't think that we're going to get the information that we need from here, right? And here's why. Though, I mean, I can find the order ID, but I don't see the total. I see the ship amount and the tax amount, but that doesn't give me a total, right? Okay, no. So then I need to go to the order items table and take a look. And here I have the item, the order ID, the product ID, the item price, the discount amount, and the quantity. And it seems to me that at least the item price and the quantity is necessary to calculate that price, right? So that's where we're going to go. All right, so given that piece of information, I'm going to keep the order items table highlighted here so I can see the fields down in this corner as I'm typing the query, but I'm going to go back to my main query tab here and start creating the view for this. So the first command is create view, right? 2 words. We're naming it. And once again, database programmers often use conventions like this in order to name their views, right? Many times with prefixes. Some people will spell it all the way out. Some people will abbreviate it with a letter or two. And then you saw the W3Schools approach with the square brackets. I'm not a fan, but you're aware, basically. All right, so we're going to create a view called VW underscore order total. We are going to select the order ID, and we want the total of the associated order with the order ID. So what we're going to do here, and normally I would break this all down because of, just to explain, but we are going to take the quantity times the item price, right? And those are the fields I indicated in that table, right? And I want you to notice we're going to sum the quantity and the item price based on the order ID. So in other words, we're going to find that order ID and everything that's in that order ID. So like you may have ordered one thing or you may have ordered 5 things. That's kind of the point, right? And maybe one of those 5 things, you ordered 5 of those, right? So we have to total all of those things. And if you ordered more than one of something, then you have to multiply. And then we're going to take the sum of all of those added together times the quantity and the price. So if there's only one thing at one price, easy, right? But we are going to call this as, and I should probably use a capital T here, as total, right? So it's going to do that work, and then it's going to alias as total. All right, where are we grabbing this info from? We're grabbing it from the order items table. We're going to do a little grouping here. So we're going to group by the order ID. So we want to conglomerate those. So if the order ID is 1, I want all the things that were order ID 1 grouped together and run through. And then I'm also going to go ahead and order by the total descending. All right. So this is the view, right? So I will need to create the view in order to be able to use the view. So at this point, I'm going to run this query on this. It's not going to necessarily give me a visual result, or it may, we'll see, right? But we want to run it because that will create this in the database that we can then call upon. And then notice how we have a little area here for views that it'll populate over here. So watch me run the query, right? We got success here. I'm going to refresh. Notice how views now has that view there. And if I want to look at the data that it generates, here's an example of the data that it's generating. Now, some of this we're taking a little bit on faith, because if I go to the order items table, right, and I look at order ID and I see I've got like 3 and 3, so that they ordered 2 items, right, but they only ordered 1 of each, but we still have to add those together, right, to get the price. So that's really what we're looking at here, right, is that, added together, right? Now I want you to notice that, when I did the little view here on the view, which is kind of funny to say, it basically gave us the next line of code we need for our assignment, but they prefixed it, right? Because this, on this screen at least, I don't have a use statement where I'm saying use my guitar shop, right? When I come back to the main SQL file, which is where you should try this to make sure it works, is I do want you to say select star from, and then you just name your view. And then I can just run this line, right? And there we are, and we have the same results. So in order, if you're like screenshotting this, right, for submission, you should probably screenshot everything you see here. So I would, and in fact, you could, in principle, grab this all in one screenshot, right? If it sits real nicely. So I have the use statement, I have the query that we used to create it, and then I ran it and have a result. In terms of how the document sits, right, if you come here, they really want the query separately. and then they want to display that separately. So maybe it's better to, if you want, you could just take your code, right? Drop that into the document in the first box, and then maybe screenshot this or drop in the code and screenshot that, however it works. But that's what we should be seeing here. If you want me to demonstrate, you could just do this, right? So you could just paste that in as text. That's fine, right? That works. Or if you prefer to screenshot, right? Just copy it and then you can paste it into your Word doc like that. Either way, right? Whatever you think is better. In some ways, I kind of like pasting the text in because then you can copy paste it later. But that's also saved in MySQL Workbench, and you can save that as a SQL file. So screenshots are fine. And then for the second one, I would probably just screenshot the command on line 9 with the output and paste that into the second box. So number 1 is done, folks. Everybody okay? No issues, questions? All right. Let's move on to the second one. All right. It says now create a view called large order total using the current order total that we just created. Your new view must use the previous view as part of the query. However, only display those orders larger than $1,000. Okay, it sounds kind of like a fun little thing to do, depending on your definition of fun, of course. All right, we're still on the same SQL file here, so we assume the use statement is still relevant. All right, so we're going to create now a new view. And you know what? I'm going to hide this or drop that down. So we are going to create a new view. So we'll say create view. This will be called VW underscore large order total. And then we write our query. So next we're going to select the order ID like we did before. And then this time we are going to be rounding our values. And why are we rounding? To make sure that we fit into monetary amounts here. And just in case, like we're really close to $1 amount, this will help to take care of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say round. What are we rounding? The total to 2 decimal places. And we will call that total. Now, this time, instead of pulling from the order items table, we're going to pull from the view that's been pre-created that carries that information in there. So think about this. We're going to be pulling basically from this view that we're seeing on the screen right now, right? And now we're only looking for the values that go over 1,000. So we just have to put that in as a criteria and say where total is greater than 1,000. All right, so that's the code to create the view. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these other views here at this point just to create a little screen space. And I'm going to execute this query. So I'm somewhere within it. I'm going to hit the second lightning bolt here. And you see that it worked. And if we come up here, we refresh, you notice that we've now created a second view and I can see it right here. All right. Now to utilize it, right? So to select it, we just simply want to call all of it. So we're going to do a select star from the new view that we just created. So large order total. Okay. If we go ahead and execute that command, you'll see the output here. And then notice that we only now have orders over $1,000. So what's kind of neat about this, and I want you to think about this, right? We have a pre-created mechanism that shows us our order total. So like if you're a manager, you want to see, hey, how much stuff did we sell today? You got a really quick list, right? And then, all right, now I want to see the ones that, were the big ticket orders. Let me see those. Right. And here you go. It's already pre-built. Right. And so we don't have to re-engineer the query each time. It's just automatically there. If you're application building, and I'm just kind of giving you ideas here, right? You might create buttons in your application that perform these actions automatically that always call upon these views, which are now built into the database. So these views, and this is why this is important, you guys, what we're creating here is getting stored in the database, and then we can use it over and over again. We don't have to re-engineer our queries every time. So this is a really, really common thing to do. Very often, creating views is also a precursor to creating reports or outputs that we want to see, like a real common thing. Like if you were running a retail store, you would want to see, like, at the end of the day, when you flip the sign over to closed, you want to see how much money you made that day. What was your gross? How many customers did you have? How many items did you sell, etc. Right. All right. So that's the second exercise. Let's move on to the third one. And I'm going to scroll down to that. It says with this one, let's go back to the original view and modify it. Now we want to include the discount amount as part of the calculation. We should have a net total for each order ID. Now, some of you guys noticed that like the first time around, and and I very much didn't say anything about it. That there was a discount thing. So right now what we were doing is we were taking this and just multiplying it by the quantity. But hey, if you get a discount, man, I want my discount, right? I want to use that coupon code. It's Black Friday, right? I want to get my savings. So now we're going to factor that in, and we already have this built, right? So this is kind of an interesting thought here. Do we drop what we have created, or do we create or replace view? That's kind of the experiment here. Now, I will tell you that my preference, right, and this is kind of a matter of habit, right? My preference typically is to do this: drop view, and then name the view you're dropping, and then do order total, and that's the command. And you execute this, and that view goes away. And then when I create the view again and make the modification I need to make to it, a piece of cake, right? So that's one way to do it, right? The other way to do it is to do create or replace view, and then just name it, and then carry on, right, with your stuff. All right. Now, because I'm a little old school, right? And I say that not as an insulting thing, I'm going to go ahead and do the drop first. I just feel more comfortable with that, because then I can see that it went away, right? Then, because otherwise, if I do the drop and replace, then I always feel compelled to go back and look and go, oh, did it fix? Oh yeah, I guess it did. So it's not really saving me a step if I'm always double checking it. I should probably trust it more, but I prefer to do the drop first. All right. So next, let's tweak the original query. So really, I shouldn't have to do a lot of changes to this. I should be able to just grab it as is, which I just copied, and now I'm scrolling down and pasting it back in. But we do need to make a tweak, right? So most of this is going to be okay, but this part is fine with the total, right? But we also need to add something to it, and I'm probably going to go to the second line here just not to waste space. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create another sum, and I like to have my parenthesis right next to it. That's just me. And this time I'm going to take the quantity times, okay, another set of parentheses here for order of operations, and I'm going to take the item price, and that's underscore price, minus the discount amount. And then I need one more parenthesis here to close that out. So this is the other way to see it. So we're going to see the total, and then we're going to see that as total with discount. So in other words, I will see what it would have been and what it's gonna be, right? If you feel where I'm going with that. So we'll show the regular total like we did before, and then we'll show the total with the discount. The only difference is we're subtracting the discount price from the item price before we're multiplying it, but we're still totaling it. Still pulling from order items. We're still grouping by order ID, and we're still doing the biggest orders at the top, right? And that's how it's going to display. I'm going to go ahead and run the query. Here comes the run. Right. And I did get an error here. So what is my error? And did I like mess up here? It says create unknown column, discount amount. Oh yeah, check it out. And here we are going into panic. I got to spell amount correctly. All right, let's try it again. You know, and it was underlining, was it? Wasn't it? All right, so this time it worked. I'm going to refresh little schema tables over here, and then I can see that it is there. Now it has the total with the discount. All right, so that created the view. That doesn't run it, right? So now if we want to see it, we could issue this command again. So I'm just going to drop that in down here. So we're just going to show the whole thing, right? Here comes the run, and there it is. But notice this time we do have the output as well, right? So we see the total with the discount. We also see just the regular total. And you can see there's quite a savings. So yeah, you want the discount. Absolutely. All right, that was number 3. Everybody okay? I know I'm going kind of fast and I don't want to lose anybody along the way here. So I'm keeping an eye in the chat, or if you have a question. All right, thank you for the thumbs up, you guys. I appreciate it. All right, let's move on to exercise number 4. Let's read that one. All right, so here it says drop the view table or the large order total view, right? And notice, don't forget to see if it exists, right? You know, and I tend to do that manually. So that's all we have to do for that one. All right, so let's just do that. Now we did one drop already. So then we're going to do drop view. And this time we're going to do the large order total. So VW underscore large order total, right? And once again, let's execute that query. Looks like it worked and it went away, right? So we got rid of it. All right. And now let's come down here and move on to number 5. Right. So that was the drop. I guess we kind of already did that, you know, so it's not quite as eventful as what I just made it before, but you know, it is what it is. All right. This time it says, let's create an updatable view. And it says there are many restrictions when creating an updatable view. And you can read this little thing, you know, so we'll keep it simple, right? So, and what I'm going to do here is I'll kind of explain what I'm doing. And you know why we consider this updatable, basically. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is this. Let's come in here and build the basic view that they're asking for. So it says create a view named customer info displaying customer ID, first name, last name, and active from the customer's table. The active column was created earlier as a small int, right? And that was from which table? The customer info table. And I am not seeing that table, of course. Oh, right here. Okay. So I see right here, right, that we have that column. And in fact, let's take a look at the data in there just to see, right? And you'll notice that not everybody is active. You know, Alan Sherwood is active and everybody else is null. You guys picking up on that? All right. So what we're going to try to do is see if we can manipulate this table, basically. So I'm going to leave that open. But down here, let's create this new view. So I'm going to create view, and let's just, maybe say this, like if you do this work a lot, you might get in the habit of just always doing this. It's like, I don't know if I have this one. I'm just going to create it again. Right. So you might always want to say create or replace. If it's not there, it's not going to harm anything. Right. So not a big deal. Right. Um, but what we are going to create is a view called customer info. Right. And then we write our query. So here comes the select. And it told us the stuff to select. So we're going to select customer ID. We're going to select first name. We're going to select last name. And then we're going to select the active column also, right? From, and this time we're going to say customers. Right, that's where we're pulling that information from. All right. Let's run this so it gets built. Here comes the run. And refreshing here to make sure. And there it is. Customer info, right? ID, first, last name, and active. Now, let's see the results of it. So now we're going to run the select statement. So this is part 2 of number 5, I believe. So here's the select from the new view that we created, if I can type it correctly, called customer. It's a capital C. And I don't know how many of you guys are picking up on the fact that MySQL doesn't really care so much about upper and lower case, but we still try to be consistent. And the why to that, by the way, is some systems are highly case sensitive. So you better err on the side of caution. All right, so there's the select statement to see what it pulls out. So let's run it. And there's the result. All right. So it shows exactly what we asked it for, right? And then we see who's active and who's not. We only have one person set as active. That's not really good for customers. We want a whole bunch of them set as active. And I believe the last little command that we have to do here is to do the update. And what we're going to do, we're going to update Barry Zimmer to be active, right? And it says you should be able to update the active column using the view, right? So not, instead of like building the query from scratch, I don't have to rewrite the query, you see, right? This is kind of the point. So we'll do it like this. I'm going to update the view. So this is a thing we can do with views, by the way. We can update them. So we can update customer info, where we will set the active column equal to 1, but not for everybody, just for a very particular person, right? Where the last name equals Zimmer, right? We're going to make Barry active, right? So let's go ahead and execute this. Here's the run. Oh, and it did give me an error. So let's see what the error is. You're using update mode and you tried to update a table without aware that uses a key column, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it doesn't like my approach. And I'm just checking to make sure my syntax was okay. And I think it's because I'm still in safe mode. All right, so let me see if I can get the full error message, right? To disable safe mode, toggle the option in preferences, SQL editor, and reconnect. Okay. Can I ask Eddie, did this work for anybody? Anybody get it to work? Nobody did? Nope, same error. Okay, thank you, Jared. I'm going to go to preferences here under the edit menu. And it said, oops, that's not what we want. was trying to tell me where to go here, so I'm trying to follow the exact directions. SQL editor and reconnect. Okay, so edit, preferences, SQL editor. And where is the safe mode here? Okay.
It's under SQL editor. You just gotta scroll down.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm looking at it, I'm like, there's nothing to scroll to, but there really was, right? There was one more option here. Yeah, thank you for confirming what I thought I was kind of crazily not seeing. So I'm gonna uncheck that safe box. So you want to go to edit, preferences, SQL editor, and uncheck that. So let's do that. And then we should be able to run this query and it will allow for the update. It's still, yeah, well, it's blocking us, but this is the general approach. I don't want to go into like disabling the security on this. So if you just type this in, I'm okay with the fact that it works or doesn't work. Um, of course, we can just run a separate query, right? The point of this really is that we can do this um, and change things, but you have to set the permissions correctly, and we're not set for that. All right, that's going to end the chapter 11 work. So I'm going to can this video here, and then we're going to go into a break, folks. So this video is over.